Madam Speaker, I wish to move that the House adopts the motion on the report of the Standing Committee on Labour and Social Welfare on the status of labour migration and proposed policy interventions laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, the 2nd of November 2021. Madam Speaker, this is a very, very important motion that comes by way of a report by the Standing Committee on Labour and Social Welfare that focuses mainly on our issues of labour migration from Kenya to the Middle East. And Madam Speaker, I'm glad that Senator Susan Kihika, who is a very active member of the Labour Committee and who feels very strongly about these issues, because we did indeed tour these areas as a committee, including Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and I've engaged with other of our missions and Kenyans working in the GCC countries on this matter. Mr. Speaker, I doubt there's a senator here. I doubt there's a senator in this House who have ever, or who have not received distress calls from Kenyans, especially our ladies, our girls, domestic workers, who have either been stranded or who have loved ones who are sick or who have lost lives in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and many other countries. And Mr. Speaker, as I move this, I acknowledge the fact that the countries that we're mentioning and we're speaking about are indeed countries with a proper diplomatic presence in Kenya, and we have presence in their countries, and we've had diplomatic relations for many years. But we're also cognizant of the fact that, Mr. Speaker, our main priority as leaders, as legislators, must always remain the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, in moving the debate on this report, because, Mr. Speaker, it would have been very simple and easy for us as a committee to just table a report and let it be that the members can see it. But we want this report adopted because there are very specific resolutions that only this House can take in plenary. Resolutions that will ensure the safety of our Kenyan workers in these countries, that will ensure that we streamline labor migration, that will ensure that, Mr. Speaker, we can take care of our people. And I'm very happy to see Senator Shionga as well, because she was very key in these discussions. Her county has very many people who have gone to these countries. So I recognize that the global labor migration is not a new phenomenon, and it remains a key contributor to the increasing global labor market. Needless to say, Mr. Speaker, Kenya migrant workers, and there are two categories. They are skilled migrant workers and unskilled, but they transcend borders in search of better opportunities. They do not go there because they don't love their country. They do not go there because they don't want the jobs that are available in this country, but because they have lacked opportunities here. And that's why they seek to make a better living of themselves, make something out of their lives, guarantee their children a future. I'm very disappointed, Mr. Speaker. I had last week a member of the lower house of the National Assembly insulting Kenyan women who are working in these countries, saying that they've been picked up from brothels like Sabina Joy or Koinange Street, and that is where they've gone to work. Shame on that member, Mr. Speaker, because, Mr. Speaker, these are Kenyans who deserve dignity. I know very many Kenyans who have been brought up by parents who have gone to work outside this country and in Saudi Arabia, even as domestic workers. Mr. Speaker, they deserve dignity. They deserve respect, and we need to take care of them. And I will give you the context of this labor market that I'm talking about. Mr. Speaker, this search for better opportunities has increased human mobility, rapid globalization, open borders, technological advancement, and demographic challenges. In the case of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, our youth unemployment currently stands at 34.27%. That is according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics Economic Survey of 2021. Hence, a key driver to increasing the number of Kenyans seeking employment in other major cities. Mr. Speaker, many people say, because Kenyans are highly sought after, that as a country that may not have rich mineral wealth, we don't have oil and gold under our soil. Our greatest resource is above the ground. It's our people. And that is why Kenyans who have gone all over the world have excelled in different capacities. They've been able to make us proud. In fact, many of them should be regarded as the true ambassadors and representatives of the Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, let me narrow down. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates are documented as key labor destinations for Kenya's semi- and unskilled migrant workers. According to reports by the Ministry of Labor, at least 80, and I know the number is 88,000 Kenyans live and work in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Majority of them serve as domestic workers. We also have those who are skilled, and we visited some who work for the mobile company STC. Some work for, I think it's called Al-Marai, the huge, agricultural company there. Almost 5,000 Kenyans, 2,000 work in the telecom sector. Some are engineers. I remember meeting George Odongo, who works for the Saudi Metro, the rail system, which we, of course, have said that in Nairobi we need that mass transit system. The guys who did the Dubai Metro, those who did the Saudi Metro are Kenyans. So it's not just domestic workers. And I intend to bring them to Kenya when I become governor, God willing, inshallah. But Mr. Speaker, labor migration is viewed positively for many of them. And I must state here, and I want senators to listen keenly, out of the 88,000 Kenyans working in Saudi Arabia, many of them are very happy. They're able to send remittances. They're able to feed their families. A huge number, Mr. Speaker, are suffering. It might be small in terms of percentages, but anybody here will tell you even one life lost is one life too many. Even one Kenyan lady in distress is one Kenyan lady too many. If you look at the remittances that we receive as a country, and I'll give you an example, from those living in the diaspora, because it's played a vital role in our socio-economic development. In 2015, the Central Bank of Kenya reported that diaspora remittances amounted to 1.55 billion US dollars. That's excluding unofficial remittances. That represents 3% of Kenya's GDP. Further, the Gulf states and other countries contribute 18.2% at position number 3, Mr. Speaker. Number 3. In fact, mainly Saudi Arabia. Number 3 in remittances. That is after North America, after 50% of the share. Recent data between January and June of this year shows that remittances from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia are at third place after the US, the United States, and the United Kingdom. In that regard, there is an urgent need to streamline migration processes and governance to guarantee, secure, and protect the constitutional rights and well-being of all Kenyans, while at the same time leveraging on these gains. Mr. Speaker, this country, the Kingdom of Saudi, has more than 13 million non-Saudis working there because of the nature of their lifestyle. Currently, they're 88,000, and the goal, they say they would actually want 200,000 this year and maybe up to 1 million. If this is streamlined properly and we can take care of our Kenyans and ensure that, Mr. Speaker, we protect them, they earn a proper salary, they have their benefits, they can move around freely with their passports and with their documentation, it is indeed a frontier. But until then, there are certain measures this committee wants to convince senators to take for their benefit. It is needless to say that in the last 3 years, with the rising number of Kenyans leaving the country for domestic jobs in the Middle East, there's been a corresponding increase in distress calls by those alleging torture and mistreatment by the employers. For instance, as of 2021, and this is very disheartening, as of 2021, the Ministry of Labor reported 93 deaths of Kenyans, 93 deaths in the Middle East. And all of those reports, Senator Milgo will tell you, she's still around. They say it is heart attack, suicides, accidents. But we know there's more than meets the eye. Further, as representatives of the people, we continue to bear the brunt. Many members who have received distress calls, they call me. They say, who do we talk to? Yeah, when there's an issue. I've just had a discussion with Senator Zani. I've had members of the National Assembly. I remember our Senator Isaac Mwaura receiving dead bodies at Wilson Airport, or I think at JKIA. Senator Shionga gave me names. We receive these distress calls, appeals from constituents for assistance. But every day, if you go to the airport, you will find plane loads of Kenyans dressed in white T-shirts making their way. We must do something substantive as a house. They're looking up to us to resolve this matter. Some want repatriation of the relatives, afforded many. You have seen videos of people saying they're in distress, they can't get out of where they are. There have been media reports, and I keep saying we must balance these reports. Yes, we must raise that. And the reason for these interventions we are seeking, Mr. Speaker, is so that we safeguard the lives of Kenyans there and their interests and economic interests, but also we don't jeopardize that of those who are there and are happy to be there and are supporting their families. Some have built houses, they've educated their children, and we bring them back and they'll have no job. So that is why we are striking a very delicate balance. And I urge members to go through this report. I know the Secretariat has shared it on our platform. Just go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore against the foregoing background that the committee, in undertaking its oversight and legislative roles in the case of labor migration issues, was part of the Kenyan delegation alongside the Ministry of Labor for a visit in the Gulf region. We undertook a study visit between the 10th and 20th of April, comprised members of both the Standing Committees of Education and the Standing Committee of Labor and Social Welfare. The goal was to review the existing bilateral labor agreements between Kenya and Saudi Arabia for domestic workers, and also in the United Arab Emirates, and to establish firsthand the goings-on in key migrant destinations, in strategic labor destinations in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. In view of the fact that these issues of labor migration are within the purview of the committee, and further considering the complaints, incidences, and claims linked to unskilled migration to the Arab countries, and aware of the economic contribution of labor migration to the country, the committee escalated its investigations. We did not stop at just visiting there. In our report, we reviewed existing opportunities and assessed obstacles for improved processes and labor migration governance, and subsequently, we have provided practical policy and legislative and administrative solutions to these problems. I know many Kenyans have been waiting for that report. We did not want to rush it. We came back. We have sat with different entities. We met with the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Interior and National Coordination of Government, especially the State Department of Immigration, the National Employment Authority that actually vets and registers the agents who send workers, or rather who facilitate the employment. We sat with the recruitment agencies. There are two associations of these recruitment agencies. And while we, of course, acknowledge the efforts of the Ministry of Labor to implement certain specific activities in the course of 2021-2022, and whose objective is to enhance the labor migration processes and governance, we are concerned about the deteriorating conditions of migrant workers, particularly in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we are of the opinion that the processes likely to protect life and welfare of Kenyan migrant workers supersedes all others, and therefore must be prioritized. Mr. Speaker, while we were there, we met with the Ministry of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on, I think they call it human resource, it's in the report. We met the mega recruitment agencies there. These mega recruitment agencies are huge companies that deal with recruitment from across the world. And it's important to note, Mr. Speaker, that even for you to be registered as a mega recruiter in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you put a security deposit that is equivalent to 3 billion Kenya shillings. That is not what you're proposing for ours, but there must be a level of security deposit when a Kenyan worker leaves this country. They're insured, we have a guarantee of their flight back in case they want to leave. We know where they are staying, in whose family they have been recruited, and what contact numbers they have, so that in case of anything, we can contact our Kenyans while they're there. They must be protected. It is important to note, as I've said, labor is such a huge, and especially labor migration, is a huge potential economic frontier for this country. But our country lacks a comprehensive policy and legal framework useful to guide, govern, and create stability in the migration process. The fact that we lack that is not a secret. There is no labor migration law. There is no national migration policy, labor migration policy. I know we were engaged a few weeks ago with all these departments talking about a draft, but it's a draft that speaks very lightly on labor migration, which is the biggest cause of migration. We don't have migration from Kenya because of war. We don't have migration from Kenya because of hunger. The migration from Kenya is to seek out opportunities. And we saw, Mr. Speaker, case studies of other countries that are taking care of their people, even in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They have negotiated a country, government to government. They have even negotiated salaries. They have negotiated the rates of calling back home. They have negotiated the rates of remittances and the status of their people. A Kenyan living in Saudi Arabia, in Dubai, in the US, in the UK, is as Kenyan as a Kenyan living in Nairobi, or Kisumu, or Nyeri. They must be treated with the same dignity. The national migration policy, Mr. Speaker, has been in the works for a long time. And so we said, do we wait? And I'm glad Senator Mazawi is a member of my committee because he was there when we went through this. Do we wait for them to finish? And we know the policy process. Senator Wetangula has been a cabinet secretary. Before you even get it into a session of paper, to be discussed in the memo, subcommittee, sub-what, before it comes here, we're going to lose another 100 lives. Should we sit back and watch as leaders in this great republic? Or should we make comprehensive and substantive interventions based on the information that we have received as Parliament? So it is my hope that finally, when those policy documents and legislation are brought, we will be able to fast-track their passage and enactment, but that we shall take action in the midterm, in the meantime. So this labor migration to key labor destinations has been going on in the absence of either formal agreements or MOUs for a long time. In fact, there is one which we are really pushing and waiting for, the BLA, the Bilateral Labor Agreement on skilled labor. Because they are looking for skilled labor. They're building a brand new city. We have engineers, we have electricians, we have masons, we have, all of these skills. But once we have a proper framework between us, they'll have opportunities there, Mr. Speaker. But even where those exist, the MOUs, they are weak and they're deemed insufficient in safeguarding the rights and well-being of Kenyan migrants. We've done comparative analysis with other countries. And this explains the numerous ongoing cases of abuse being experienced by those seeking employment in these countries. With a growing number of migrants to the Middle East, therefore, as a matter of priority, and I'm sure Ministry of Foreign Affairs are listening, Ministry of Labor is listening, and our agencies are also listening. There is a need for us to streamline processes for effective governance. Recruitment processes, the recruitment agencies, which are in their hundreds in this country, the pre-departure training. You find, Mr. Speaker, sorry, I will not do that again. You will find, Mr. Speaker, it's because when the Deputy Speaker sits there, she really sits. But I know I'm getting used to this. You find some ladies have been taken, domestic workers, during the month of Ramadan, and they say they're not being given food because they have not been trained of the culture and even the religious practices. Some of them have not gone to Form 4 or even to high school. And for deep in the village, in some parts of this country, there may not be exposure to different religions. And so they don't know how to take care of themselves, what time to get up to be able to prepare, etc. just the cultural issues create such tension, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, issues of migrants' legal identification and registration. What happens in these countries when after the medical test has been done, the migrant worker goes there and gives birth? The citizenship of that child, Mr. Speaker. Those are questions that have arisen. And we discussed, our laws are different. If a child is found born in this country and whose parentage is not known, but is deemed below the age of 8, then they're assumed to be Kenyan citizens. But there's need to harmonize what our law provides and what these countries provide. Screening, assessments, referrals, enhancement and formalization of linkages between our ministries and the destination government ministries. Article 221 gives us the mandate, Mr. Speaker, to appropriate resources for various government agencies to implement policies and programs. And on the same breath, to foster safe, orderly, and regular migration in line with objectives, principles, and values of the Global Compact, of which we are a signatory to as a country. So we need resources. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate that specific key migrant destinations like Jeddah and Riyadh, formal mechanisms, including and not limited to requisite consular services, consular assistance for self-improvement, well-being, and protecting their rights, are absent. Mr. Speaker, we lack safe houses. Other countries have safe houses in those labor destinations. Mr. Speaker, in the whole of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and you know the size of that country, we have one labor attaché, one gentleman called Juma. And Mr. Juma is so stretched and strained in dealing with it. Imagine the cases that come to you only as Senator of Laikipia, and you're here. What about the labor attaché there? He's completely overwhelmed. So some people think he's doing a good job, some think he's doing a bad job. He's been responsive every time we've spoken to him. But we need proper labor officers in both of those destinations, fully fledged, with those safe houses. Mr. Speaker, we sat down with the Kenyans working there themselves. We sat with those who've just come in, very excited and optimistic, and we got to exchange contacts. But a few weeks and months later, they started sending us distress calls, some of them. We also met a category, Mr. Speaker, which I will be very delicate in describing. They are called Kemboys. You know why they're called Kemboys? Because they've ran away from their contracts. They're Kenyans nonetheless. But they've run away from their contracts because there are some rogue agents there who come and tell you, Sister Naomi Shionga, you've been hired to this family at 50,000 bob. Now, there's a job for 150,000 job. Yet you've deposited your documentation. So she leaves that employment. But where she goes, and in that country, which is very strict, without certain identification, you cannot even get access to health care. We have had Kenyans dying at the gates of hospitals in Riyadh and in Jeddah. Mr. Speaker, these things that we should gloss over as a house, as leaders, surely. Will God forgive us for glossing over these things? Or for only looking at the financial benefit that certain people are getting? God forbid, Mr. Speaker, let it never be said that in our time in this house, we saw such things happening. We got information from those involved. We sat with ministries from 2 states, a kingdom and a government, and we will gloss over such a report. God forbid. I will not be part of that. And Mr. Speaker, that is why this committee wants to take the move. Some may call it drastic. I've heard some senators saying that we are throwing out the baby with the water. We are not. Mr. Speaker, we are recommending as a committee that all labor migration of domestic workers, and I need to be very clear, the majority whip is distracting the seconder of this statement, of this motion. We're recommending that all labor migration of domestic workers from Kenya to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia be immediately suspended upon the passage of this report until the executive demonstrates that the following basic minimums have been put in place. The suspension is for a period until certain conditionalities have been put in place by the executive of the Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, one, we need the establishment of the status of all Kenyans currently in Malaz prison in Riyadh, Taril deportation center in Riyadh, Sakan, which is a new deportation center in Saudi Arabia, and all and any other prisons and deportation centers within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with the aim of repatriating them back to the country. The government must speak to the government. And one of these is someone who we met before they abducted him and took him. One Peter Callisto, a gentleman who had been part of what they call Jaliat. It's a community of Kenyans who come together to help. So if you find, for instance, that the sister I spoke about, Naomi, has those status, but she's in need of help. She's in need of health care. They come together, they fundraise, and they enable this person to get health care. They used to have a letter, and it's part of the recommendations, that would say, in as much as this person might not have documentation, this person is recognized as a Kenyan citizen, kindly accord them health care, first aid, emergency health care. Peter Callisto has been in deportation since we left Saudi Arabia to date. There are no charges against him. We want it to be established. Give us a full report and evidence of the complainant, because they say it's his employer. His employer says they have not complained. It's the embassy that has sent him there because he allegedly organized demonstration. And also a lady called Lucy Wamaitha Ndiba. Mr. Speaker, they must give us the status of all the Kenyans in those 3 prisons and deportation centers, and why they're there, what they're there for, and whether a repatriation process of bringing them back can take place. Mr. Speaker, the government must tell us. Today I've just seen a video of bodies being removed which had not been found from a mortuary. Today, I've been shown a video. They must tell us how many Kenyan bodies are lying in Shemesi mortuary in Riyadh. Number 2, the executive must establish the current status of all domestic workers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, their contacts, their places of work, and set up a database and lines of communication between them and the labor offices at the embassy. And many of those are those who want to continue working. But until you've established that, even the employers know that there's no government watching me. I can mistreat this Kenyan the way I want to. I can do whatever I want to do to this Kenyan. There is a system called Musanid. And in the Musanid system, for all new labor migration of domestic workers, because it's part of our BLA, all that information is there. I can tell Mercy Waithera left Kenya on this date, landed in Jeddah, went to Riyadh, is living with his family, this is a salary, this is a contact. Our labor attaché in Saudi does not have access to it. And when we sat down with the head of Musanid in the Kingdom of Saudi, they said, no, these guys should get access. Because even they want to know which of their own citizens are abusing other human beings. There must be dignity in this world. Mr. Speaker, C, until we have the return of all current and former domestic workers who are in distress and stuck in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and want to come back. There are those who want to come back, and they're not able to come back. That is a conditionality that must be met. D, suspended until the investigation and submission of a report to the Senate of the cases of Kenyan migrant workers whose deaths have occurred in Saudi Arabia. Apart from the number we were given almost casually, 93, without names, without proper reasons, we want a proper report. And amongst other things, this report on that issue must demonstrate the linkages between the labor attachés and the recruitment agencies in handling of distress calls and other complaints by migrant workers. Mr. Speaker, and without imputing improper motive on all the agencies, because I know some of the agencies are proper. But there's some agencies, because of the commercial nature of this, are sending girls away like potatoes. Because you're told that for every worker, domestic worker who is taken there, the agent receives $1,500 to $1,900. So what do? You rush and you collect people. You put them in a dormitory. I saw a news story the other day of Kenyans stuck somewhere in Thika. And they can't come out. They were told they were going to do different kind of work. Then they are told now it's domestic. It's become so commercial that we're seeing Kenyans as commodities. We're seeing Kenyans as commodities. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to see that attachment. And we have said that there must be fresh vetting and re-registration of all of the local recruitment agencies with the vetting standards to be determined by the Ministry of Labour through the National Employment Authority. To this end, Mr. Speaker, no entity will be allowed to recruit Kenyan migrant workers unless this entity is registered and regulated in Kenya. Because there are also foreign entities that have come here and are taking the girls directly. Yet we have a law. I sponsored that law in the last parliament on the National Employment Authority. And the reason why we put in place there, in the board, Foreign Affairs, Labor, we put, Federation of Employers, we put representations from the technical training institutes and the universities, was because to safeguard, to make sure that there's accountability when it comes to labor migration. We are not exporting potatoes. These are mothers. These are people's daughters. These are people's children. These are people's sisters. These are people who we must think of keenly as Kenyans worth dignity. Mr. Speaker, there must be an establishment before we reopen labor migration of domestic workers to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Fully fledged labor offices and safe houses. A safe house in Riyadh and a safe house in Jeddah, accessible to any Kenyan in distress until the status is established and able to be brought back. Mr. Speaker, we've had cases of where, and I know this will really prick Senator Abshiro because she has such a heart for such cases. A Kenyan domestic worker is being abused, goes to the embassy with her employer from that country, from Saudi. The case is listened to, and first of all, the complaints, this is alleged, but it could be true, is that immediately the stance is to take the side of the employer. And after she has said everything, she's told to go back with that employer as a process. What happens to that lady when she's gone back to that house where she's being abused? We need safe houses for them. What is the cost of putting up a safe house? With sanitation facilities, kitchen, beddings, human dignity, Mr. Speaker. So that must be done. If the formal recognition of the welfare associations of Kenya and Saudi Arabia, I've given the example. There used to be what you call Jalayat. I hope I'm saying it right for those who understand Arabic. Kenya Jalayat Group, who used to liaise with the embassy, and they worked very well. Incidentally, Mr. Speaker, they worked very well with the former ambassador who became Wajir governor, who this house impeached. But they worked very well with this Jalayat. Later on, I think the system has broken down. So they are not able to respond to distress calls by these Kenyans. And until they can get the phone number of Senator Musuruve, who now looks for her chairman, Senator Sakaja, to sort it, we can't. So we must reestablish that. Mr. Speaker, G, or rather H, we must review the regulations of private employment agencies, including the determination of a minimum deposit and insurance to ensure the swift repatriation of any domestic worker in distress. Those are the conditions, Mr. Speaker, that this House, and that we're inviting this House to say emphatically, Senator Milgo, Senator Susan Kihika, Senator Ngugi, IG, Senator Naomi Wako, Senator Abshiro, Musuruve, that until these are met, let's not take our girls to a slaughterhouse. Until these conditions are met. Once these conditions are met, the other things that Mr. Speaker were saying, and the committee has recommended a raft, if you look at our report, of other issues that then must be taken into account, including our skilled labor, BLA, Mr. Speaker, including negotiation on the salaries, negotiation for leave days, because they're also humans, they're not machines, Mr. Speaker. Some of these timelines, Mr. Speaker, actually came from the ministries themselves. They must work together. In some of our interactions, we found the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has no clue about what the Ministry of Labor is doing. The Ministry of Labor has no clue about what immigration is doing. It should not take the Senate in a sitting of a committee to be the first time departments of government are sitting together to address this matter, matters of life and death and livelihoods. It should not be. If they just look at the framework we provided for them under NEA, they are supposed to be sitting on the table together. What more important thing are they doing? So we recommend that the ministries address the current hiccups facing other critical processes but not limited to pre-departure processes, medical checkups, and pre-departure training. Mr. Speaker, we need to be told how they are identifying which training or pre-departure, which institutions are being registered. So it's not about a cartel that I'm the one who has the schools of training. Mr. Speaker, to get your medicals, because they do medicals before these workers leave. But you're told there are only 2 or 3 centers that can do it. Why can't all our public hospitals be able to do this medical check and certify? And the Embassy of Saudi Arabia here, together with the Ministry of Health, can liaise to make sure that the standards required are the standards that they are adhering to. These people are going through so much. Mr. Speaker, I know you're a tough man. You're a tough man from Laikipia, but if you were there, you'd shed a tear. Because you have a heart. You would shed a tear if you hear these stories. Mr. Speaker, I will add an addendum to the report that we tabled of the photos and videos I've received today. I will add an addendum so that members can see of correspondence, of emails, distress calls. I wonder how people feel. You've received distress calls, you've ignored, you've seen distress calls, and then you later hear a death announcement of that person who's been crying out to you for help. How do you sleep at night? Yeah? So, Mr. Speaker, in doing so, we intend that we'll have taken a holistic approach in addressing labor migration challenges. This suspension ideally is for 6 months because we believe in less than 6 months this can be done, even within the current budgetary framework that exists. And Mr. Speaker, we are saying here, because I know we also have colleagues who are there currently from the National Assembly, and they have been meeting these Kenyans who still talk to us, that we shall not take lightly any intimidation or victimization of the Kenyans there who have given this committee information. If there's information that is contested, then let them come and we keep inviting them to committee to contest that information. Mr. Speaker, we sat with CAS Ababu Namwamba, who has been leading this team. He was supposed to go to Saudi. I hope he went. He should meet these people. He committed to. We gave him the contacts. CS Chelugui, with whom we're supposed to go, but the government put restrictions on the executive traveling. He's supposed to go there to establish his status. But as the House that has the sole legislative authority, being Parliament, Mr. Speaker, I invite senators to support and adopt these resolutions that will go a long way in not just protecting these Kenyans, but enhancing our labor migration ecosystem as a country. Mr. Speaker, the committee, having considered the report on the status of labor migration, has proposed those policy interventions that members will see. And Mr. Speaker, I beg to move. Thank you.